Lesson 1-2 deals with fractions, decimals, and percents. They're all rational numbers, and being able to switch from one system, notational system, to another. So you'll learn how to change fractions to decimals, decimals to fractions, and decimals to percents, and percents to decimals, and fractions to percents, and percents to fractions, those kinds of things. We'll start with fractions to decimals. You probably know that 3/4 is 75 hundredths. Here's how you can improve that. And this, by the way, is called a terminating decimal because it stops at the 5. That is the last digit here. There's nothing after it. So you can think of the division of the fraction bar as a division bar, which would mean we can make this problem 4 divided into 3, which of course goes 0 times. But you can annex zeros to your heart's content. And 4 goes into 3.0 7 times, bring the decimal straight up. Multiply 4 times 7, and subtract. And here, as we thought we would, we get remainder 0. And that's our answer, 0.75 or 75 hundredths. Another familiar one, you probably know that, I didn't mean to put that, let me erase that. Probably know 2/3 is equal to 0.6 repeating. And you'd have an endless string of 6s if you continued with this. This is a repeating decimal. Can't name it exactly. It just repeats 6s forever and ever. So again, we follow the same rule. It's 3 divided into 2. Goes 0 times. Annex is 0. And we're going to bring the decimal straight up. Goes in 6 times. Subtract, and we get another 2, and you can see what's going to happen. We can annex another 0, and we keep getting 6s. So 2/3 is 0.6 repeating. We go from a decimal to percent. It's helpful to remember that percent means out of 100. And we'll start with a couple easy examples. If we have 83 hundredths, it should be pretty obvious that that's 83% because percent means out of 100. If we had 45 hundredths, that would be 45%. Now let's take a little more difficult one. It looks like 83 hundredths, but I'm going to put a 7 there. So it's 837 thousandths. Now that's awfully close to 83 hundredths, so it's close to 83%. And you might see a pattern here that we're just taking the decimal and moving it over 2 places. So it started here and moved over 2 places, and we put a percent sign around it, or after it. Move this decimal 2 places to the right, put a percent sign. So we're going to take this decimal and move it 2 places to the right, which puts it between the 3 and the 7, and then put a percent sign after it. So it's 83.7%. If we had 0.45821, that would be 45.821%. If you have 1.83, that would be 183%. So basically what you're doing is multiplying by 100 and adding a percent sign. Take the decimal number, multiply it by 100, which moves the decimal 2 places to the right, then put a percent sign after it. And you'll often hear that explained that way when it's a pretty rough percent sign. Okay. In this slide, we're going to talk about how to change a decimal to a fraction. And you have to know what the place value to make this work, or to make it the easiest. I mean, here's your decimal, and then to the left is the ones place. To the right is the tenths place and hundredths place. So when we read this decimal, we're going to say 73, just read the digits, like just kind of disregard the percent, the decimal, and say 73, and then name the place value. So it's 73 hundredths. And if I can read it like that, say it that way, then I can just say that's 73 hundredths. And I have to ask if it's lowest terms, which in this case it is. Or if I have 46 hundredths, I'd write 46 over 100, which is not lowest terms. I can divide both numerator and denominator by 2 and get 23 50ths, which is lowest terms. If I have, maybe I have a number in the ones place, and we'll make it 5 and 5 hundredths, which I could write this way, 5 and 5 hundredths. Then I can divide both numerator and denominator by 5 and get 5 and 1/20th. So that's how you can work changing a decimal to a fraction. In the previous slide, we learned that to change from a decimal to a percent, we multiplied by 100 and added a percent sign. So to go the other direction, it would make sense that we divide by 100 and drop the percent sign. So we have 28%. If you do 28 divided by 100, the result is 0.28. We drop the percent symbol. So basically what we're doing is moving the unseen decimal, but if there was one here, it would be after the 8, because it's like 28, the whole number, with the decimal here. Move the decimal 2 places to the left. So we go from here that way, and drop the percent sign, and you have 28% is 2800ths, which makes complete sense because percent means out of 100. So 28 out of 100 is 2800ths. So let's take a look at a few more tricky examples, perhaps. If we had 18.5%, we're going to multiply that by 100, or divide it by 100, sorry, which would move the decimal in front of the 1. And it would be 185 thousandths. Or if you had 355%, we move the decimal from after the 5 2 places, which is dividing by 100, so it's going to fall between the 3 and the 5. Should put it right here, 3.55. And remember that 1, or 100%, is 1, and 1 is 100%. So this makes sense that 355% would be 3.55. So that's how you can move a percent to a decimal, divide by 100, and drop the percent sign. The slide's showing how to change a fraction to a percent, and we're going to go fraction to a decimal to a percent. So we're really not learning anything new. We know how to go from a fraction to a decimal, and from a decimal to a percent. So it's sort of putting some skills together. So if we go back to what we had in this first slide, 3/4, we changed that to 0.75 by dividing 4 into 3.0. And then in another slide, we learned to change a decimal number to a percent by just multiplying by 100 and putting a percent sign in. So that's basically it. Change the fraction to a decimal, then change the decimal to a percent. Let's take another example, maybe 5 and, let's see which one we haven't done, 1/8, 5 and 1/8. You'd work with the fraction part here and say 1/8. Yeah, I'm not going to do the division, but if you did, you would get 0.125. Then when you change that to a percent, it would be 12.5%. Okay, that's the 1/8 part of it. The 5 part of it, the 5 part is 500%, and the 1/8 is 12.5%. So the total would be 512.5%. So you figure out the fraction part, 12.5%, the whole number part, 500%. Then you add those two values together. 500% plus 12.5% gives you a total of 512.5% for this kind of weird problem here. Now we'll learn how to change a percent to a fraction. We'll start with a pretty simple one, 37%, which you read as 37 out of, it's 37 out of 100 because percent means out of 100, so we're going to use that and say that's 37 out of 100. That's a fraction that's already in lowest terms, so that one's done. If you had one that's not going to come out to be lowest terms, 48% would be 48 over 100. And you can divide both of these by 4. That's the largest number. You get 12 over 25. Yep. Then one that's not so straightforward. Let's say, I'll take that 37% and piggyback off of that to make it 37.5%. So if I follow my strategy, that would be 37.5 over 100. And that's not a fraction because you have a decimal number in the numerator, but it's pretty easy to make it a fraction. Just multiply, use the equal fractions property to multiply both numerator and denominator by 10, and you get 375 over 1,000. And then when you reduce that to lowest terms, I think maybe 25 is the highest number that goes into both of those. We'll learn in the next slide how you reduce that to lowest terms. The last slide is on simplifying fractions and improper fractions. A fraction is in lowest terms when there is no number that goes into both numerator and denominator other than the number 1. So if we would take a fraction like 6/8, we can divide 2 into both the numerator and the denominator. So the 6/8 is not lowest terms, and we get 3/4 when we do that. And the only number that goes into both 3 and 4 is 1, so that's lowest terms. You can take a fraction and, like if you had 40 over 48, if you find that the largest number that goes into both 40 and 48 and do that division right away, then you'll get lowest terms right away. So in this case, the number that goes in, the largest number that goes into 40 and 48 is an 8. But I can take a smaller number. I can divide by 2 if I wanted to, and I get 20 over 24. And I could divide by, of course, I could divide both of them by 4 at this point. But if I divided by 2 again, I would get 10 over 12. Then divide both of those by 2, and I would get 5 over 6, which I would have gotten right away if I divided by 40 divided by 8 gives me 5, and 40 divided by 8 gives you 6. So it would turn out to be 5, 6. I'm going to go ahead and show the dividing by 4 here, mainly because I don't have enough space over to the right to do 2 more divisions with 2. So I get 5 over 6, and that's lowest terms. An improper fraction is a fraction that has a number in the numerator that's larger than the number in the denominator. It's like 12 over 4 is an improper fraction. And I can simplify this by just doing 4, because I can think of this fraction bar as a division bar. So it would be 12 divided by 4, and the answer to that would be 3. And 3 over 1, if I wanted to put it that way. If I have 13 over 4, we can do 4 into 13. This sort of remainder comes in. It would go 3 times remainder 1. And that 1 goes in the numerator of a fraction, and the 4, the divisor, is the denominator. Because remember, I am figuring out how many fourths there are. If there, the 4 is fourths, and I have 13 of them. So there's the 1 that's left over is a fourth. So that's the simplifying fractions and improper fractions. And that's it for this lesson.